Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this month's episode of the Leader's Edge webinar from CCMA. I'm Mike St. Pierre, your host. Deacon Frank is out on assignment this month, so I will be your guide along with two incredible campus ministers who you'll meet in just a minute. So again, thank you for joining us today. You could be anywhere, but you've chosen to be here, so thank you very much. We're in for a treat. Our presenter today was supposed to be Kelly Adamson from Dayton University, but believe it or not, as can sometimes occur in campus ministry, she had a campus emergency. And so we have two guides today who are taking her place because she could not be replaced by just one person, and that's John Schott and Maggie Riggins. John Schott is the Assistant Director of Campus Ministry at St. John Fisher College in Rochester, New York, and Maggie Riggins is the Director of Campus Ministry at DeSales University in Center Valley, Pennsylvania. Between the two of them, believe it or not, they have over 40 years of ministry experience. And that doesn't mean that they're old, it just means that they started doing campus ministry when they were very, very young. So John and Maggie, we're thrilled to have you, and thank you so much. Before we get into today's conversation about evangelization on campus, just a couple of brief announcements. Number one, the CCMA convention called 2020 takes place from May 26th to the 29th in sunny San Diego. I don't know how warm it is where you are right now on the 15th of January, but San Diego sounds pretty good to me. Looking at you, John Schott, from Rochester, New York, where it's rarely sunny. San Diego sounds like a great place to be, and we'd love to have all of you there with keynotes like Father Josh Johnson, host of the Ask Father Josh podcast, Dr. Jean Tweng, author of iGen, super speaker Mary Bielski, and the director of the Duke Catholic Center, Father Mike Martin. Why would you want to miss Called 2020? Come on, people. Did I mention that we also have over 40 workshops from fellow campus ministers? If you haven't yet signed up, there's still time to take advantage of early pricing. Just head on over to ccmanetwork.org for details. Number two, Mastermind Group. This is our online 6-week small group learning platform. And it's coming up. Our winter cohort begins, believe it or not, next week. And it is for campus ministers from Catholic colleges or universities. Again, it starts next week, and we only have 2 more days to register for this affordable 6-week online program. Just head on over to ccmanetwork.org/mastermind for details. And third and last announcement, next month's webinar is on February 19th, and the topic is racism on campus. You'll meet Danielle Brown from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops as we unpack the U.S. Bishops' document on racism and how it might apply to our ministry on campus. Okay, on to this month's topic, evangelization. And the first thing I'd like to do is turn off my video camera and make sure that my screen is being shared with everyone there. So just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen there. Yes? Yes, okay, very good. Okay. So first of all, let's start with in the chat box, if you would, just share with everybody where you're from and a question that you might have related to evangelization. If you're not sure where the chat box is, I think it should be on the right side of your screen. And again, just share with everyone, where are you from and what is a question that you might have related to evangelization or today's topic. So I'll start just to model that again, just in the chat box. Where are you from? And what's a question you might have about evangelization? Okay, and that's awesome. They're coming in fantastic. James is from St. Edward's University, talking about interfaith and ecumenical ministry. Dan from West Virginia University, how often do you meet with campus ministers from other faiths? Great question. John, who we mentioned earlier, from Rochester, New York, reaching out as a part of a rebuilding or renovation of your campus ministry program. Michelle from the CCMA staff. Michelle, great to see you just from right around the corner. Let's see, Michael from Mount Mercy University in Cedar Rapids, welcome. Again, Josh from St. Edward's in Austin, Texas, great to have you. Kate from Campus Ministry Staff, University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota, wonderful, welcome. Christina from Niagara University in New York, what are some resources, conferences to train student leaders to evangelize? That's a great question. Father Joe from Sacred Heart University, wonderful to have you. Melissa from Anne Maria College, how do you most effectively evangelize to the majority when you're limited with resources and staffing? Melissa, that's a great question. We're actually going to get to that. How do you evangelize when your resources are limited? Deacon Rodney from the University of Tennessee at Martin, great to have you. Deacon Paul Cavino from Assumption College in Worcester, Mass. That's pronounced Worcester, not Worcester. How do you continue a spirit of hospitality of other faiths while enhancing Catholic evangelization? That is a great question. That's at the heart of what we're talking about today. Drew Peters and Francis from Oakland University, Michigan, welcome. Heather from the University of Memphis, question about effectively evangelizing in an area that is not heavily populated with Catholics. That is a great question, presumably in the South. There you go. And Anna Mae from Salve Regina University, with a very low percentage of non-Catholics on campus, how do we not overwhelm those who are not Catholic? That is a wonderful question. And Brendan Johnson from Mount St. Mary's University, what are some ways you form students to evangelize? Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully, and also James asks, how can a Catholic campus embrace the religious and worldview diversity that is on a Catholic campus, conveying an attitude of mutuality and that all faiths and worldviews sit on a level playing with Catholicism, lacking a rhetoric of, quote, church triumph mentality? Great question. Yeah, how do you be proud of being Catholic without putting down those who aren't? So wonderful question. Okay. And feel free to continue to put some things in there in the chat. Always appreciated. So let's take it a step further and look at some context, because I think when we talk about evangelization, it's a little bit of a loaded word or phrase, and maybe it's always been that way if you think about it. I appreciate a couple of quotes as we sort of set the table here related to evangelization. This one is from Bishop Barron. He says, I don't know any issue more pressing now in the life of the church than addressing the problem of the massive attrition of our own young people, especially the young. That's really interesting. Now, Bishop Barron, as you know, is a popular speaker and auxiliary bishop in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles and a prominent teacher. But this issue of young people who drift from the faith or choose to leave the faith or abandon the faith, it's obviously a big issue. None of us would be on the call today if it wasn't. And it's not just an issue. It's not just one part of what we do. St. Paul VI says it's the task of evangelizing all peoples. This is the essential mission of the church. And I appreciate this quote because I know that a lot of our campuses, we have campus missionaries or we have grad interns who we task with certain things related to evangelization. And there are times where we can feel like, hey, wait a minute, I'm doing evangelization too. And this quote is very poignant for me. I was with a congregation of religious priests and brothers maybe about a year ago, and they were lamenting that the word evangelization has become so trendy today and that there's some confusion perhaps. And he said, we've been doing that all along. Our congregation has been built on evangelization, and maybe we're just not the latest group that's doing it, but we've been doing it. And maybe you can relate to that as well, that your campus has likely been doing, quote unquote, doing evangelization for a long, long time and likely doing it pretty well. So let's talk about avoiding the two ends of the spectrum. One end of the spectrum might say, well, evangelization, it's everything we do. And another end of the spectrum might say, well, evangelization only takes place in our RCIA program. Everything else we do is more generic, but really it's RCIA where we evangelize the non-believers. And maybe you might say, I hope you don't, but maybe some people at the bottom of the screen there, you can see they might say, well, that's for the evangelicals to do. You know, we don't do evangelization. That's not really a Catholic thing. But as you can imagine, it is a Catholic thing. And certainly St. John Paul II, he said back in 1990 that back then, it was the time then to commit all the church's energies to a new evangelization. And more recently, Pope Francis has certainly invited all of us to evangelize, where he said every Christian is challenged here and now to be actively engaged in evangelization. Indeed, anyone who has truly experienced God's saving love does not need much time or lengthy training to go out and proclaim that love. But the catch, and there's always a catch, is okay, easier said than done. What does that look like on my campus? So I want to invite you now in the chat to just share, if you would, one way that you feel your campus, quote unquote, does evangelization or practices evangelization. And in the chat, you might enter something that's very small. It might be a particular attitude that your staff has, or a posture or an approach, or it might be a particular program that you offer that you feel like really does a great job of sharing the good news. And in just a minute on the next slide, we'll look at the U.S. Bishops' Conference definition of evangelization. But I think it's always valuable to just kind of self-inventory and for all of us to say, what is one way we feel our own campus practices evangelization? So why don't you go ahead and put that in the chat, and we'll see what everybody has to say. All right, so John says, it's a very intentional effort to permeate campus life in every aspect with a ministry or mission presence. John, can we take you off mic or off mute for a second? And do you mind just sharing a little bit of what do you mean by that? That evangelization is an intentional effort at your campus to permeate Christian life. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me. You can?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So yeah, what I what I mean by that, Mike, is to give everybody a little bit of context. We've essentially had it's been amazing because we've had a blank slate, right? Very briefly, the context of our current ministry situation. In 2014, 2015, the previous college chaplain died suddenly and unexpectedly. And so from 2015 until really December of 2017, there was no real ministry going on. Members of the congregation that are assigned to the college were, sort of limping mass along, but there was no ministry presence. So the new chaplain was appointed. He hired a new staff, and the college, recommitted itself to its identity and its chapel in renovating our campus ministry center here, which is smack dab in the middle of campus. So we essentially came in with a, hey, you can do whatever you want, right? And I realize that's probably everybody's dream, because sometimes there's always baggage here and there and things like that. But our effort was, quite literally, we're not going to be the closed off ministry only type of ministry. We're going to be the ministry that is out there constantly in everything. So quickly, a couple of practical examples. I serve as a freshman advisor here on campus. So for the past few years, I've had a corral of 25 freshman students that I'm advising for the whole year. And also with that comes teaching a class. We're collaborating with clubs and student organizations, even on simple things like service projects and minor things that we think are sort of minor, but they think are major, so they can interact with us, encounter us, be with us. We're going to sports games, things, participating in blessings and things at practices. We're going into the residences, blessing freshmen when they move into the rooms and things like that. And these all might be common practices on your campuses and in the history of your campuses, but here they weren't. So to have this dramatic shift from non-existence to kapow, you are everywhere. Everybody sort of takes a second glance or does a double take of, wow, ministry is something that's actually vibrant and has life and is exciting and is a vital part. The best thing that is the sort of hallmark of this effort is, when I arrived here on campus in the fall of 2016, our average weekly attendance at liturgy was about 15 students, right? And some of you are probably like, wow, that's low, but that's our reality. But this past semester, after just a couple of short years of work, we're now more than 100 students at every single liturgy on campus, right? So that's just massive. And it's all because of this intentional effort of going out rather than sitting in our offices and sort of doing the motions. I hope that makes sense.
That's fantastic. And also, having been to where you are, I can speak to the centrality of your location on campus. Yeah, thanks, John. It's really helpful. Maggie, how about you? Do you want to chime in here in terms of you're also at a Catholic campus? How do you feel like DeSales really practices and lives out evangelization?
Just to echo a lot of what Jonathan said, is one of the phrases that I use on our campus is that not everybody's involved in ministry, but ministry is involved in everything. And that if you have an opportunity to access and be a part of the general campus life in addition to ministry type events, then that whole idea of building that foundation of trust that I'm sure that from forming intentional disciples of, you have to build that trust. I saw in the chat that hospitality is the first step in evangelization. I think it's wonderful. And really, I just want to comment on the chat that's going on with everyone providing the things that they are doing on their campus. There's such a beautiful blend of, recognizing the image of God in each person, of using scripture, but then also giving out donuts and having a seminarian around that there's resources to kind of to give out to people that are coming by. And I think the more creative that we can be in doing all of those things, that there's that theological component of why do we care? We care because we're made in the image and likeness of God. And why do we love our faith? Because the faith contains the truth of the good news of Jesus. And then how do we want to communicate that is going to look different on each and every campus. I saw that one group, or one campus minister has peer ministry program, which I would love to have, if Kate wants to talk a little bit about that, because people on campus, they're going to listen to their peers. And the notes that I was taking, and what's really great about at least our students that we have at DeSales is the ones that are involved in campus ministry, caring, gentle approach in sharing their faith with others. And I think that's really important that our students have that comfort and that confidence in talking about their faith in a way that's inviting, in a way that's engaging, in a way that isn't aggressive, I guess, that they're able to communicate their joy in a joyful way, and that it doesn't become overwhelming for, when there was one campus that had, low non-Catholics, that if it
Okay, thanks, Maggie. Thanks, John. I think we may have cut off Maggie there for a little bit. Yeah, great. No, fantastic. Okay. I appreciate that. A gentle, loving, and yet joyful expression of sharing faith. You could see in the chat some wonderful things here. Every week we do Liturgy of the Word on campus with students, recognizing the Imago Dei in each person. Donut evangelization, always effective. Never turn down a donut. Embracing the charism of mercy. Trying to provide education around the Vatican II documents on ecumenism. Fantastic. Deacon Paul says we put a lot of effort into hospitality. We feel like it's the first step in evangelization and a peer ministry program. So yeah, excellent. There's so much to say here. Before I go on, would anybody else like to come off mute and chime in with either a comment or a question for John or Maggie? Okay. So let me continue with just a few other context setting ideas here. It is important to define terms, and U.S. bishops in their document Go and Make Disciples, I think, do this well, where they say evangelization means bringing the good news of Jesus into every human situation and seeking to convert individuals and society. Here you go. By the divine power of the gospel itself, at its essence, are the proclamation of salvation in Jesus Christ and the response of a person in faith, which are both works of the Spirit. I appreciate that in a college setting, this idea of proclaiming the good news of Jesus in every human situation. And I think we would all agree that there are a lot of situations on a college campus that are kind of messy, and it's not easy to be a college student today. In fact, it's very, very difficult. So this is the tension that we want to unpack even further today, this idea of sharing the faith, but also providing hospitality. And so I have 4 questions for all of us to consider. And the first one is this. What is the mandate that you've been given by your university regarding the promotion of Catholicism? And is there any mandate that you've been given in terms of walking with students of other traditions? In other words, this idea of accompaniment, but perhaps with or for students who are not Catholic. So let's open this up. And John or Maggie, if you want to start the conversation, and then we very much can open it up to everybody else. And if you don't want to answer or ask a question with your mic, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll keep an eye on that. John, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this a bit. The mandate from our college about, the promotion of our identity and our heritage is in the college's founding and mission statement, right? St. John Fisher was founded in the 40s by the Congregation of St. Basil, the Basilian Fathers, a order that came from France to Canada and then came across the lake. And like many other colleges in the late 60s, early 70s, the congregation moved from a platform of direct control into empowering a lay board of trustees, et cetera, et cetera. So the Catholic identity and the Catholic tradition of the college has always been there. But like many other colleges, we are independent of direct control of a religious order. But in the mission and identity of the college, we were very clear that we are a college in the Catholic tradition. We draw a lot from Catholic high schools, both here in Rochester and then on the corridor across New York State from Buffalo. Christina might be mad at me talking about that from Niagara University, right? Our chaplain went to Niagara, so we stole him away from her too, which is okay. But also from Syracuse and things like that. But anyway, we've been always Catholic, right? And in the past 3 years, we have gently but very intentionally reaffirmed that. And the truth is, then sort of tiptoeing around it and saying, well, we're Catholic, but we're not, and you don't have to go to church and you this and that, and you don't have to do it, right? We're just honest about who we are. And along with that, we don't have a mandate from the college about walking the students of other traditions, and I saw somebody in the chat mention this, we take what comes in Nostra Aetate really seriously, right? It's church teaching. We don't reject anything that's holy in anybody else's tradition, and we walk with and dialogue and collaborate with people of other traditions on a daily basis. Literally, when Maggie was answering the question before, the president of the Muslim Student Association was standing right outside our office door, right? So we're working very hard to reach out to people of other religious traditions, but at the same time, honoring and being equitable to the reality that our campus is about 50% Catholic, self-identified by the students. So it's just always been there. We're reaffirming it very gently, but very intentionally. But at the same time, really working hard to bridge that gap and bring people in and have dialogue and opportunities for all of us to explore our faith traditions together. One of our hallmark phrases is a quote from St. Basil, which is, "Let me try to fan into flame that spark of divine love which is in each one of us," right? That holds true whether you're Catholic or Muslim or Jewish or whatever. So we focus on that and we really try to do the best we can.
Thanks, John. I like that you've been intentional. You're proud of being a Catholic college, and you have the fruit is there. Maggie, what about you at a Salesian school? Do you have a mandate, whether for those Catholic students or non-Catholic students? What does that look like? What expression does that take on your campus?
Sure. Well, the word mandate, I think, is a little strong, Mike. Maybe there's another word for it, responsibility or
responsibility.
Things like.
Yep.
there to point out that we're Salesian and Catholic means universal, so everyone and anyone is welcome here. And also part of our strategic plan coming up in the next 5 years is to really focus on a Salesian quality called uni-diversity. And so the uni, that we're unified, but we're unified through our diversity. So I think with our new president having that as a hub of his spirituality for the school and from Salesian spirituality, I think that's where my mandate's coming from. You know, that we're intentionally going to have more interfaith dialogue, more different student groups on campus. We don't have any known percentage of what our student population is. It's not a question that we've ever asked, so it's kind of hard to swim in an ocean, and I don't know the other fish that are in here, but we, you know, a lot of times people self-identify, or just those moments of hospitality of saying, hey, we're going to throw together you know, let's say give out donuts specifically for a DeSales Christian Fellowship group, and to see if people come for that. Or being in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, there are other non-Catholic colleges where there's different student organizations, such as a Muslim Student Association. Well, there was going to be a conglomerate of Muslim students that are going to be getting together. So that prompted me to invite, you know, through our, you know, everybody has a different like email system or portal where you could get daily messages. So I just put it out there if there were any Muslim students. Well, now we have a functioning Muslim Student Association on campus. So I think this is, at least for my campus, there's, you know, again, that great pride in being a Catholic and Salesian institution. But that doesn't mean that we can't also care for and minister to those of other faiths. Because once we care for and minister to them, then we can open up that interfaith dialogue. So that's where we're at on our campus. So there's other people, I'm sure they're on this call, that might have a fully functioning interfaith council or experiences on their campus. And I would love to hear about that as well. If we want to, you know, talk about if we're walking with Catholicism, is that seen? And then if we promote people's other faiths, you know, the fact that we have a DeSales Christian Fellowship and a Muslim Student Association, you know, there are some people in the Catholic community that are part of the DeSales community. They're like, well, why are you spending time doing that? Or that should not be coming out of campus ministry. That should be coming out of another office, when really that's not the vision of the university itself.
No, that's good. Yeah, thank you, Maggie. I think it's right. Yeah, it's not taking up the majority of your time, but there's a place for ecumenical efforts. How about question number 2? What expression does hospitality take on your campus regarding students of other faiths? So Maggie mentioned already, you know, just getting into the email chain for the Muslim Student Association and having opportunities for Muslim students to gather, that's one way of expressing hospitality. Again, feel free to put in the chat, or if you'd like to come off of mute, what does that look like on your campus? How do you provide hospitality to students from other faiths? And yet, do you see that as part of being Catholic, or do you just see that as part of being a good steward, a good neighbor, a good campus minister? So again, feel free to put that in the chat, or if you'd like to come off mute and chime in with your mic, fantastic. Okay, Kate Salvatore says, we also have an interfaith council that meets monthly to include students, faculty, staff to promote dialogue. Fantastic. Heather Beekman says, University of Memphis is actually pretty supportive.
This is Drew Peters.
Go ahead, Drew.
Drew Peters, yeah, from Oakland, actually at St. John Fisher in Rochester, Michigan. And our parish is the campus ministry for Oakland University. And I came in a year and a half ago, coming from a campus, being a campus minister on a Catholic campus. And here I am in a state school here. And first thing that happened was, this was a year and a half ago, so the Tree of Life shooting happened. And they had that was in October. if you recall, and we gathered prayer service, and we were right there in the middle of that with the Jewish organization Hillel and the Muslim students, and then ever since then, there was another shooting again that following spring, and then we've been doing we've been doing these things. We've been doing talks now, and we're planning speakers every semester. So it was almost like just kind of happened because we were trying to educate people, and we were right in the middle of that conversation, and we just kept on going with it every semester, and that's just grown. So we're smaller entities in the bigger scenario at the university, and bringing a Christian really trying to further that conversation and dialogue on campus and really support it. So it came out of a need, and then it's just been a joy ever since.
Yeah, it's thanks for that, Drew. It's too bad in a sense that there was that need, and yet it was an issue that you could all gather around. And I suspect there's other issues that we can use is not the right word, but just maybe that can unite us with those other traditions on our campus. Things related to mental health, things related to the environment, things related to security, things related to perhaps poverty. These are a lot of different points of contact that we can have with other traditions. And there's just, fantastic things in the chat room here. Thank you for that. Let's go to our third question related to RCIA. And I was just at Seton Hall University earlier today. I had lunch with the chaplain, and we were talking about their RCIA program and what it looks like and how they do RCIA and some of the unique wrinkles and things like that. And my question for him was, how is it a part of evangelization at Seton Hall? Is it a part? Is it the pinnacle? What role does it play? Is it the center of the wheel? Is it just one of the spokes? It's a really interesting question. And I'd like to maybe start again with John and Maggie, and then open up to everyone else. How do you promote RCIA? What role does that play in your approach to evangelization? Is that an aspect of evangelization? John, let's start with you.
So with RCIA, I mean, quite simply, we promote it as, do you want to become Catholic, right? We're open and honest about it because that's what it is. And we do, a bit of finagling there and a bit of, not misinformation, but things like, are you thinking about the church? Have you ever thought about deeper questions about life? But we're very clear that it's a process, and that, there's a period of inquiry, and then you're invited to go into a period of education, et cetera, et cetera. So we're out there, and we're very visible and transparent about the reality that it's the RCIA process. Now, it's been there hasn't been tension on it, but we've been careful because for, clubs and other organizations, there's a pretty strict no solicitation policy on campus, right? And there's a no proselytizing policy on campus. But, this is part of our identity. It's not as if we're saying, you must become Catholic to be a student at St. John Fisher. This is one of our programs. It's part of our identity. It's part of our history. And we do pretty well with it. The process kicks off actually with the adapted campus version of the Alpha course, right? So it's literally students sitting around talking about questions, having something to eat, watching a video, and getting to know each other rather than jumping into, well, these are the 4 marks of the church and these are the precepts and things like that. We get to all of that, but it begins really with this basic conversation of, hey, you got questions? Come and let's talk about it and hang out. And that's been a dramatically wonderful way to begin the entire process. And out of the 3 years we've been here, and the 15 or 16 students that we've seen come through it in the past couple of years, 1 or 2 said, yeah, this isn't for me right now. And we're cool with that too. And they still hang out, and they're still around, and they're still invited. So, I mean, RCIA is a part of who we are. It's a part of our identity, our heritage, and our programming. And, you know, we don't need to hide that or be ashamed of it.
Thanks, John. Heather says we refer students to local parishes if they want to go through RCIA, but between the Focus missionaries and Heather, we meet with students and we accompany them on their journey so that they feel supported, and we even attend RCIA with them if they want. That's really interesting. Maggie, how about at DeSales? What does RCIA look like at DeSales? I should mention that DeSales is in a fairly country part of Pennsylvania, which I love. I live 15 minutes from there. But what does RCIA look like there in the middle of the cornfields?
Well, I want to just give a different perspective from all the great things that Jonathan was talking about, is to have a really good relationship with the theology department, because this is where our students might first be hearing about faith, be hearing about theology, and be hearing about the good news of Jesus. So a lot of times RCIA candidates come from their Theology 109 courses. And the fact that, you know, all of the theology professors know myself, they know my staff, we have a great working relationship, that when they say, you know what, this person is writing some really great reflections, but they mentioned at the beginning of the class that they're not Catholic, but, you know, maybe if you want to invite them to something. So there's this really interesting and beautiful dynamic between the campus ministry department and our theology department that we're kind of working both ends of the spectrum, I guess you could say, that they might recognize a student who isn't showing up at campus ministry programs, or maybe isn't friends with someone who's involved in campus ministry, that they're seeing in the Catholic faith that I haven't been able to see, but I wouldn't know about that student if they weren't in class. So I think for at least the people that are on Catholic campuses, you know, do you know your theology professors? Do they know what you offer? Are they aware that campus ministry does RCIA on campus? Maybe meet with them and talk with them, because they're, in one sense, another resource to be using, that they might have 30 to 40 students in a class, and people permits. So that's what I would recommend. Other than, I mean, that's really how the students have been coming to us. Either they've been coming to Mass because a friend lovingly invited them, which is, again, that beautiful power of peer-to-peer ministry, or they had, you know, Dr. So-and-so's intro class, and they cried after every class because it was so beautiful and touched their heart, and they didn't know what to do with it. So then they came to campus ministry. But having that relationship with the theology department, I think, is also very, very helpful.
Anyone have any perspective from a non-Catholic campus? And I wonder, Maggie or John, do you have any advice for those who they don't have that relationship with the School of Religious Studies, if there is one on a non-Catholic campus? Do you have any advice there? And anybody else want to chime in on
that? I'm happy to say something, and I don't know, I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, right? But you know, being experienced in parish ministry and seeing how some RCIA programs are run in a parish, I sort of, I'm a little sad for, or feel bad for perhaps state schools or non-Catholic campuses that might have to refer students to a RCIA process in a parish, because many of them, and I'm talking really sort of about my own parish here, it's way too much. It's a year-long thing of so many classes and it's unattainable for a college student. But, you know, certainly here, if we were to get somebody from, you know, down the street, or there's another school here in Rochester, and they didn't like the campus ministry there, they didn't like their parish, I mean, we would certainly talk to them about RCIA and things like that. But the truth is, I don't think I have any really great advice about it, because my experience of parish RCIA has been sort of oppressive, or you know, read this book and we're going to talk about it all the time. We're here, we like to live it, right? And I sort of wish I could have RCIA people from parishes come and see how we do things here, because I think it would make it better.
Yeah, that's fair. I've heard of some campuses who are using a one-to-one RCIA program now, you know, so that instead of waiting for the students to show up just on Tuesday night or just on Thursday morning for the group meeting, they're just pairing them up one by one. Okay, great. We're beginning to land the plane as we begin to conclude our conversation, but we do want to talk about some of the obstacles to evangelization on your campus. And you can't say that there are none. But what would you say in terms of what makes evangelization difficult on your campus? Is it the immaturity of faith? Is it perhaps the lack of faith? Is it the institution itself? Is it demographically where you are? Is it geographically where you are? Some parts of the country are just more open to certain things. So what are some obstacles that you might have? And again, feel free to put it in the chat. If anybody would like to come off of mute, you're more than welcome to. But evangelization is not easy. And as John said, they're having over 100 students show up for their masses. But John, how many students are at St. John Fisher?
3,800.
3,800. Okay, so there's a lot more out there, no question. And I've seen your chapel; it's just beautiful. They should want to see that chapel; it's gorgeous. But there's a lot more who could be there, So we all have obstacles, even when we're doing our very, very best. So what are some of your obstacles? Anna Mae says, students are pulled in so many different directions. It can be hard to have a significant conversation. That's really interesting. Anna Mae, do you want to comment on that? You're in New England. You're at Salve Regina. Feel free to come off the chat if you'd like to.
Okay.
Yeah, what do you mean by that in terms of just they're pulled in so many different directions? It's hard to have conversations.
Right, between their classes and their extracurricular activities and demands of sports programs that some of them may be in, and just trying to survive the academic schedule, the time, the mental space that's open to be able to sit with them in a calm way and take some significant time to discuss matters of spiritual importance. It's hard to find that time.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Let's see. Dan Holland in West Virginia says it can be difficult to find the in-between where we want to help out students that already have a deep faith, but also help our students who are new to their faith. That's really interesting as well. And Dan only has, 30,000 students there at West Virginia. Anybody else, do you want to comment on this or jump into the conversation? What makes evangelization difficult on your campus? What are some obstacles? And don't, certainly John and Maggie jump in here, but it doesn't have to be limited to just John or Maggie. What are some of the obstacles that perhaps even keep you up at night where you say, oh my gosh, if this stumbling block were just out of the way, we could be reaching even more students?
I talk a lot, so I promise this will be the last thing I say. I really will let everybody else talk. But I think our biggest challenge to evangelization on our campus, truthfully, has been ourselves, right? When really we're a part of their overall picture of their Fisher experience, which includes athletics and the residence halls and academics. We get bogged down in, well, why aren't more people coming? Why aren't they responding? We don't tend to think they have 4 exams due the next day. They're writing 5 papers. They have a track meet. So I think part of our challenge is placing ourselves into the mentality of our students and being a part of their life on campus rather than us expecting them to fit into a mold that we have. So like how you were talking about the one-on-one experience, we do a lot of that stuff too. And we just try to be present and work with them the best we can. But when we get bogged down thinking about the processes, the deadlines, the this and that and the other thing, that's where we really sort of get like, frustrated or tired about it all.
Okay, that's fair enough. But I think that takes some humility too, in terms of just knowing their experience and their many commitments, etc. Paul Cavino, would you like to come off mic and just talk about what's it like being in New England? That's a unique challenge spiritually, and as somebody from New England, I can certainly relate to that. But would you like to come off mic?
Sure, that's fine, Mike. Yeah, we recently partnered with Focus, and the 4 Focus missionaries are all from geographical areas other than New England. And one of the wake-up calls they had to go through was realizing that New Englanders tend to be very private about their faith. An example is taking one of our students to the Focus conference last year, and within the first 24 hours, someone came over and said, "Oh, come over here and share your faith with me." And this kid more or less said, "What? Are you kidding? We don't do that in New England." So there's sort of this part of being God's frozen chosen. That's sort of a geographical challenge to break through. So that's one of the challenges that we deal with. So it just, I think, requires a certain patience, that you're not going to immediately have a faith conversation. You're going to have those relationship conversations first, and it may take a little bit more time in that step of the process before you delve into some real faith questions.
Yeah, there's a certain sense of privacy in New England that's, I don't know, it's hard to explain. I didn't appreciate it until I moved out of New England and then realized, oh my gosh, I was raised and wasn't even aware of it. Kind of interesting. Heather says there's a lot of misconceptions and preconceived notions about the faith in the Catholic Church that sometimes makes evangelization on campus difficult. We're also in the Bible Belt. Heather, would you like to come on, Mike, and just say a little bit about that?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, dozen students. But in Memphis, like I put in my message, only about 4% of the population is Catholic. So it gives us kind of a small pool to try to work with as far as people who are already Catholic. But yeah, like people come in, with these ideas of what they think that church teaches, and most of their ideas are simply not true. But I think that that's created an extra obstacle. Yeah, and I mean, typically when we talk to students, they seem pretty receptive, but it has for sure created obstacles for us before.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. I'm so grateful for everybody's perspective, and I just want to affirm the work that you all are doing. This is very hard. It's special. It's blessed, and it's why we get out of bed in the morning. But let's not fool ourselves. This is hard work, and unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, it never really ends. I don't know anyone who's in campus ministry who goes home at the end of the day saying, "I got everything done today, and everyone's taken care of on campus, and I don't have to worry about anything." That's just not the experience for anybody that I know in campus ministry. I do want to point out a couple of perhaps follow-up resources for each of us. And Maggie and John, we're just giving you kind of a virtual clap here in gratitude for just sharing your wisdom and experience today, especially on short notice filling in for Kelly. But a couple of things, if you go to the CCMA website and if you go to About and then Tools, there are links to all kinds of things, from archived podcasts, webinar replays, YouTube training videos, if you want to brush up on what the U.S. bishops say about campus ministry, or even a PDF version of the small group field guide. There's a lot of resources there. And I'll also say too, and I know I'm totally biased, but the CCMA convention in May is really a wonderful opportunity to learn even more about evangelization on your campus. Whatever your campus looks like, there's somebody else out there who's probably going to be at the convention who can relate to your experience and who can be part of your network of experts. So again, a shameless plug there to make sure you check that out. Let's close with a word of prayer, and then we'll send everybody on your way. A reminder, too, that this is recorded and will be posted to YouTube in the next 24 to 48 hours. So if there's perhaps somebody on your team or somebody in your diocese or campus who wasn't able to join us today, you could always share the link with them. Okay, let's pray. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Lord our God, we praise you, we bless you. We're grateful for the ministry that you've given to us and for the students in our care, for the staff members and colleagues who share our vision and our heart for you, for the church, and for reaching more students. Thank you. Thank you for this work within higher education. Please bless us. Help us as we continue to share the gospel in a very diverse setting of our campus. Give us bold faith and courage, and bless those who may not yet know you. We're grateful for this day and for this last hour that we've shared together. Please send us on our way. And most of all, give us the gift of joy, knowing that what we do matters so much. And we pray this in Jesus' name, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you next month.